Look at this for 5 seconds. What is the motion you think of when you first look at it? Now consider why you think of this. Is it because of the shape, the color, the things happen to you today? What if you don't want to feel like this anymore? To understand ourselves better, we must know what controls our daily life. So we need to understand what is emotion. Emotion is a complex reaction pattern involving experimental, behavioral, and physiological elements by which an individual attempts to deal with, as defined by American Psychological Association. Normally, we experience emotions like sadness, happy, and anger. However, when these emotions accumulated for a long period of time and cannot be vented properly, these accumulations will eventually become mental illnesses. So, what really makes our emotions become negative? It is very complicated, and we cannot certain which specific factor leads to a disorder. There are many factors, including both biological and environmental. Well, let's take an example. A 15-year-old girl called Alexander is diagnosed with depression recently, and her mother was diagnosed with depression 10 years ago. Alexander encountered a lot of challenges, including failing the test on these days. Now let's have a think. What caused her depression? Well, we can explore this question by looking at two aspects. First, let's focus on how nature, which I call biological factors, contributes to mental disorders. When we think about mental illnesses, most of us will relate it to stressful events happening during the daily life. However, genetic inheritance can also contribute to this depression and mental disorders. A study conducted by Peter and others found that if one monozygotic twin have to become depressed, there was a 46% for another monozygotic twin to become depressed too. However, if a dizygotic twin become depressed, there's only 20% for another one to become depressed. This shows that depression might be genetic because the monozygotic twins were at greater risk of becoming diagnosed. Furthermore, this suggests that the genetic inheritance of disorder from parents is highly possible, not only for depression, but this can also be applied for other mental disorders. The principle of genetic inheritance is that specific gene coding for the emotion is passed on to their children. Thus, children have a higher probability of developing the disorder too. For instance, the 5-HTT gene is linked to depression and responsible for the serotonin. It can be passed on to children, and when it is activated, individuals are more likely to develop the mental disorders their parents have. Their serotonin levels will fluctuate abnormally, resulting in unstable emotions. Well, speaking of serotonin, what is it? Let's delve into the second biological factor, hormones. Have you ever feel like you're out of control and you don't know why you're sad? It is the influence of hormones. Hormones are everywhere in our body. It is responsible for our acne on our face and also our height. So which role do hormones play in our emotions? Hormone levels in our body usually maintain a stable level. However, when disturbance occurs, the level fluctuates, resulting in imbalance. Therefore, a shortage or excess of hormones will result to have a bad or good emotions. There are several hormones responsible for your emotions. For example, cortisol and serotonin, which are associated with stress and depression respectively. Apart from above factors, our brain structure is also responsible for our emotions. Like when I was young, I always wondered why that age of 18 is set as a line between teens and adults, and what happens to us after 18. The answer is that our brain becomes mature. Well, this maturity doesn't mean that our brains looks better, but it means that when we're facing stimulus, our brain can respond more stably. While the prefrontal cortex and limbic system are responsible for our emotions control. The prefrontal cortex is where informations are processed and decisions are made. When we are teenagers, our prefrontal cortex processes information subjectively, which is why teens act more impulsively and make more opinionated judgments about themselves and about the world. While the immature prefrontal cortex may lead to judgmental information processing, such as negative thoughts about themselves, resulting in pessimistic point of view. Well, on the other hand, nurture also plays a role. Remember the 15-year-old girl called Alexander I mentioned before? She encountered a failure in her daily life, which is we call events that nurture her emotion. Hence, it is possible for individuals to develop mental illnesses after they are born. As people grow up, they face different life experiences and meet various people. These influences, apart from genetic factors, also contribute to people's mental disorder. Environmental factors include the environment where individuals live in, such as the school and your families. For us, as students, our environment is basically where we live and we grow up. The environment affects us crucially, as the comfort level we are in at one place over a long period of time contributes to how our emotions changes. To be more specific, imagine Alexander is living in a family that is extremely repressed, that her parents divorced, and she is constantly denounced by small things that even is not her fault. She also suffers from test failures recently, so this is a terrible situation for her. But if she grew up in the kind of situation, she will probably develop mental disorders as she has to bear a lot of emotions. Besides your living environment, the people sit beside you, maybe it's your friends, they can also contribute to your mental health. You may wonder how others can influence you because you are all independent individuals. However, peer influence your emotions unconsciously. A study conducted by Corrado and others found a long-term depression peer effects for female teenagers followed into their adulthood. In particular, they show that peer depression negatively affects the probability of college attendance, the likelihood of working, and leads to a reduction in income of adult females. From this, we can see that peers can influence your mental health very importantly. So it is important for you to keep your peers in a good psychological condition. While biological factors and environmental factors are linked together to activate one's disorder. So both nature and nurture contributes to your emotions. However, to further develop a mental disorder, activating events should occur. It seems abstract. Well, let's use Alexander's example again. Since Alexander's mom is diagnosed with depression 10 years ago, it is highly possible for Alexander to inherit the depressive gene. This means that Alexander might have a genetic predisposition to become depressed. However, she will only become depressed if something happens, which we call the events that nurture your emotions. By knowing more about how do both biological and environmental factors contribute to disorders, let's turn the focus on the explanation of depression from a cognitive point of view. There's an Aaron Beck's model. Beck believes that depression could be explained by 3 negative thought patterns that people may develop about themselves, the future, and the world. Beck feels that this negative triad probably develops from bad experience that people have before. Once they have a negative way of thinking, they are more likely to perceive things that happen to them in an abnormal way. This leads to negative self-schema, where a person's whole belief system about themselves is covered in negativity. Besides, Alice has developed the ABC module. A refers to activating event, B is the belief, and C is the consequences. For instance, you failed in your exam, then you began to reflect the reason why you failed in your exam. You believe that you are not good at study at all, and you attended a birthday party last week, so you failed the test. Well, this is an irrational thought that leads to a negative emotion consequence, which may be depression. But to think rationally, the reason why you fail in the exam is just that you haven't learned and revised it. So there's nothing wrong about yourself. Have you ever feel like you are lost and don't want to do anything, but there's no specific reason of doing this? So are you confused that if you are sad or not? Personally, I feel that hard to distinguish my emotion. To be more specific, I struggle to distinguish whether I'm sad or I'm tired. However, it is very crucial for us to know which emotion state we are, so that we can adjust ourselves from the negative situation as soon as possible. So here are some suggestions of how we can detect our emotions on time. Well, firstly, you have to notice how long the confusion or sadness have been going on. If it occurs once a week, well, it's probably fine. It will be fine, just take a rest. Well, however, if the situation continues for more than a few weeks, you feel that there's no motivation to do things, then you need to consider depressive behaviors and observe your behaviors for a few weeks longer. Second, pay attention to your thoughts and ideas. If you have recurring negative ideas, such as suicidal thoughts, and you feel worthless, you need to see a therapist as soon as possible. Well, lastly, pay attention to your daily life. What I mean is to be more specific, calculate the time you slept yesterday and compare it to the last week. And also, pay attention to your appetite. Have it been extremely low or been extremely high? So, by learning all the basic principles of how we process emotions above, now I would like to introduce you some ways that can help you to adjust your emotions. As the exam season is approaching, I believe a lot of you feel stressful. Sometimes I will suffer from bad sleep since I just consider too much before I go to the bed. I believe the exam stress as well as the work stress put a lot of pressure on you guys too. We may become unconsciously distressed or worried about it, and our emotions are out of control. In order to not let these negative feelings disturb our daily life and performance, here are some suggestions. First, meditation. Taking the 10 minutes meditation sitting in a quiet zone. Find a YouTube video that guides you to do meditation. Your body and brain will have a deeply relaxed during meditation exercise. Second, just eat some chocolate. Chocolate can help you to calm down by raising the serotonin level of your body. Third, breathe deeply. Allow yourself to calm down and transfer your attention from the things you are worried about. However, if you feel like you are really in a struggle and you cannot adjust your emotions on time, you should find a therapist to have a talk. Don't be afraid, it's worth trying. Well, now, let's just try to adjust our emotions by eating a piece of chocolate.